Hello everyone, my name is Hussam Kamel. I'm working as a Regional Technology Solution Professional at Microsoft Maya Center of Expertise. Today we'll talk about lab management improvements in Visual Studio 2012. In this lab, we will learn about some of the new features and improvement in lab management for Visual Studio 2012. This includes the creation of standard environment, which allow existing test environment to be added into the lab management, with no infrastructure prerequisite and no configuration needed in Team Foundation Server. In addition, there is no longer a need to spend much time with the test agent, as there is only one test agent type and the test agents are automatically installed on the test environment. After completing this lab, you will have a good idea how easily and quickly you can now get a build, deploy, and test workflow setup using your existing development environment. In order to complete this lab, you will need the Visual Studio 2012 virtual machine provided by Microsoft. You will find it at Brian Keller blog at the following URL. Our lab contains 5 exercises: preparing a test agent machine, configuring the test controller, creating a standard environment, preparing for automated test, creating and running a build deploy test definition. Our scenarios are based on Fabric and Fiber demo. Fabric and Fiber provide cable division and related service to the United States. This is a virtual company having a website that we will use during our lab. They are growing rapidly and have embracing Windows Azure to scale their customer-facing website directly to end users to allow them to self-service ticket and track technicians. They also use an on-premise ASP.NET MVC application for their customer service representative to administrate customer orders. So, let's jump to our first exercise, which is preparing a test machine. In this exercise, you will prepare the second virtual machine that will be used later in this lab. To minimize the size of the load and simplify the preparation necessary, we will create and use another instance of Visual Studio 2012 virtual machine as a test agent machine. So, this instruction, the one we will be perform it on Hyper-V Manager, is actually intended to be used in Windows Server 2008 R2 with a Service Pack 1, and it is also working with Windows 8 Hyper-V as well. At this point, we should already have an instance of Visual Studio 2012 virtual machine, the one we downloaded from Brian Keller blog, up and running, as we mentioned in the prerequisites section. Let's jump to Hyper-V Manager. I will choose the virtual machine that we have downloaded, VS2012, and in order to create a snapshot from this virtual machine, just right-click it and click Snapshot. This will create a snapshot from this virtual machine that we will use it later to export it and import it to our Hyper-V Manager as a new VM. After done, just rename it to something else in order to identify it easily. So let's name it to Visual Studio 2012 base, as this will be our base virtual machine. So to export this snapshot, just make sure that the VS2012 virtual machine is off and right click on the snapshot that we have just taken and click export. Choose a location where you have enough space. I will add a new folder, VS2012 agent, and I will click select folder and click export. This will take few minutes to complete. After this, we will have a new fresh copy of the virtual machine that we have just created a snapshot from, and we can use it later to import it to our Hyper-V Manager. After the export is complete, click on import virtual machine, click next, navigate to the bus where we saved the exported snapshot, which is VS2012 agent, select the folder and click next. This will show our virtual machine. Please make sure that you choose copy the virtual machine and create new unique ended file. Click next. We'll ask you if you would like to change the virtual machine location. I will use the same location. The same for the hard disk. I will keep the default one. And I will click finish. After clicking import, the Hyper-V Manager will take some time to import the new virtual machine and give it a new unique ID. After importing the virtual machine, boot the first one, which is VS2012, and after the first one boot successfully, let's boot the second one, which is Visual Studio 2012 base in our case. Let's log into the second virtual machine by double clicking it to open the console. Let's just log in with Adam using the password mentioned. Now we need just to rename the virtual machine in order to easily identify it, as our base virtual machine and the second virtual machine are sharing the same name. So let's wait until we have the desktop ready. To rename the virtual machine, just click Start, Computer, Properties, Advanced System Setting. Let's name it as VS2012. Click Apply. Since we have changed the virtual machine name, we have to run certain configuration in order to get everything running correctly. So we have added a configuration file that you have to run in C util. You'll find that configure VS2012. Just double click it. It will run a command line to reflect your changes. We have to restart the virtual machine in order to reflect the new name that we have just added. So just click restart. After restart, make sure that the two virtual machines can communicate with each other. In order to do so, you have to go to the command. From start menu, type command and then type ping -4 VS2012, which is our parent virtual machine, and click enter. We will find that the virtual machine is replying back, which means that we can able to communicate with each other. If you face any issue with the communication, just make sure that you have only internal adapter that is active at a time and that the two virtual machines are sharing the same virtual LAN. Let's just take a snapshot from this virtual machine in order to save it, and this will allow us to revert it back if needed. So let's take just a snapshot by right click and click snapshot, and we are done with our first exercise of creating the virtual machine for the agent. We are ready now for our second exercise, which is configuring the test controller. In this exercise, we will learn how to configure the test controller. The test controller software has already been installed and configured on the virtual machine, so we will just take a quick look at it. So let's navigate to our virtual machine, log in with Adam and password as mentioned, click Start. From the start, in Visual Studio 2012, you will find that you have a tool called Test Controller Configuration Tool. Click it. In Configure Test Controller, note that the controller is already configured with the team project and is using the lab service account is specified here, which is administrator account, and it is registered with a team project. Registering the team project collection will enable us to create a virtual environment to run automated tests against this environment later. If you just want to run tests from Visual Studio, you can unregister the test controller from being registered with the team project collection. Let's just keep it at that and click close. Yes, to actually keep the modification without any changes. Please note that if you would like to make changes to the test controller and the configuration for purposes outside this lab, please execute the script, find any util, and which you call configure test controller. This actually will have some non-standard modification in place so that the demo URL will resolve it correctly. Now we have done with our second exercise of configuring the test controller. Our third exercise will be about creating a standard environment. In this exercise, we will learn how easy it is to create a standard environment to use that within your automated test scenarios. For the purpose of this lab, we will create a standard environment on the second virtual machine, the one that we have just created. It doesn't matter if this is a real machine or a virtual machine running on a Hyper-V or a VMware. As long as you can connect to it, you can use it for your testing. Let's switch to our virtual machine. Launch the Microsoft Test Manager from start. Visual Studio 2012. Find Microsoft Test Manager. By default, Test Manager is connected to the recent project that was opened. In order to change the project, just click Change Project. Choose from the Team Foundation Server Fabricam Fiber, which is our project. Click Connect. Choose the default test suite and click Select Plan. You will have the test center open. Just switch to the lab center by clicking the arrow and choose lab center. Now we are ready to create our first environment, so let's just click new, and this will create a new environment. In our case, we will create a new standard environment, which means that we will use an existing machine that is already set up and ready for testing. For the name of the environment, let's just enter Fabricam Fiber. BDT, which stands for Build, Deploy and Test, and then select Next button. In the Next button, you will be asked for adding the machine. So we will try to add the virtual machine that we have just created, and let's just name it as VS2012, which is the name of our machine, and for the role we will just select that it is a web server. Okay, and let's make sure that we are actually adding the proper authentication, so we'll add the machine user and the password. Just note that you can add one or more machines to the environment if you need to fill different roles for testing, such as database server, domain controller, and other servers. So for now, let's jump to advanced. In advanced, we will be asked to configure the environment to run UI tests, and this is an optional step. So let's just check the checkbox in configure environment to run UI tests. Let's just select the web server role and add the account. So I will add Adam with the password, and I will click verify so that I will verify the configuration I have added during the steps. Let's wait until we have our environment verified and ready. What the verify button is doing actually is it is verify that the credential we have provided is working fine and the machine is not already a part of another environment. After the verification steps pass, select finish, and this will start the process of installing test agent in the environment. Note that the test agent installation and the configuration proceed automatically. You don't have to do anything. The test agent installation and the configuration is taken care of for you. Whereas with the previous version you had to do this yourself. It will take few minutes for the test agent to install and for the new standard environment to be ready for use. As the test agent is installed in the VM, will automatically restart if necessary. As you wait for the test agent to be installed and configured, just note that the status of the installation goes through a number of states to keep you informed of the progress. This step will take some time to be completed, which is installing the test agent. After the automatic restart of the test agent machine, which is VS2012, you will find that the machine has logged in automatically with the account that we have registered and configured for the test controller. After the automatic restart of the test agent machine, VS2012, let's navigate to it. You will find that the machine is logged in with the account that we have configured for the test agent, and the test agent status window is visible with the status of online, which means that the environment creation is done. Just note that it may take time to reflect this status on the controller machine. So let's navigate to the controller machine. As you see now, the environment is reported as ready. Within the Microsoft Test Manager, sometimes it can take a few minutes for the test controller machine to report to the ready state, even after the test agent machine reported that it is online, but it may take some time to be reflected. Now we are ready to create an automated build deploy test workflow. In exercise 4, which is preparing for automated testing, we will use an existing coded UI test to automate an existing test case and create the test setting to indicate that we would like to use the new standard environment to perform the automated test. Let's say that we have already a test case in place that has been used by the Fabric and Fiber team for manual testing, and it has an action recording associated with that. In addition, the team has created a coded UI test based on that action recording that allows them to kick off an automated test at any time in their development environment. Let's take this existing groundwork and use it for automated test in an external test environment. Let's switch to our virtual machine. I will launch Visual Studio 2012. I will navigate to Team Explorer, navigating to the Source Control Explorer, choosing Fabric and Fiber project. I will choose the dev branch, then Fabric and Fiber.call center project, and I will open the solution. Navigate to the Solution Explorer. I will build the project from build solution in order to make sure that the coded UI test is available when backing up the automation for existing test case. I will wait for it until it builds successfully. It builds successfully, and now I will switch again to Team Explorer, choosing a new query. In the new query, change the work item type instead of any to test case, and then I will click run. This will actually list all the test cases existing in this project. I have only one test case, which is create new customer record. Double click it and navigate to associated automation. In the associated automation, click on the lapses button and then choose test. From the choose test window, let's just choose the coded UI test we have, which is coded UI test method, and click OK. This will associate the coded UI test with our test case. Let's just save the work item Now we have the test case automation taken care of. Now that we have the test case automation taken care of, let's create the test setting that we will use later on this lab. Just a small note that this association can be done through a command line tool called tcm.exe, where you can actually associate your test cases with an automated test. Let's navigate to the Test Manager, Microsoft Test Manager. From Start menu, Visual Studio 2012, choose Microsoft Test Manager. Navigate to the Lab Test Settings and click New Test Setting. In the name, just type Fabricam BDT test settings and choose automated for the test type. From the roles, select or make sure that we have the web server selected, which is Fabricam BDT, and navigate to the data diagnostics. For the purpose of this lab, leave the default selected role as is, which is system information, and just click advanced. In the advanced, you'll find a list of what actually enabled in this test setting. Just click finish. Now we have our Fabricam BDT test settings ready to be used in our build deploy test definition. Our final exercise will be creating and running a build deploy test definition. In this exercise, we will learn how to create a build definition that will build, deploy, and test the Fabricam Fiber solution using the test plan and the standard environment we have just created. The first step is simply to create a build definition that we will use as a part of our build deploy test workflow. In Visual Studio, navigate to Team Explorer, then choose Builds. In the build, click on New Build Definition. Just note that technically we can actually utilize the existing nightly Fabricam dev build as a part of our new build deploy test workflow, but the name of the build indicates that it is triggered to run on a schedule, so we will go ahead and create our new definition. Enter Fabricam Fiber Dev Branch Build as the name of the build definition and navigate to the workspace. In the workspace tab, change the source control folder to be Fabricam Fiber Dev. So you just need to click on the labs button and choose the dev folder, and then navigate to the build setting. In the build defaults, configure the build to drop its build output at the Fabricam Fiber drop folder, which is located here, VSALM/FF drops, and then navigate to the process. Just note that the drop folder we have just configured is created ahead of time in this virtual machine. If you need to create another drop folder on a network share, just make sure that the account that used for the build controller has a proper access. Switch to the process. In the process, just click on advanced. In the advanced, just focus on the disable test and actually make it true instead of false, because we need to run tests during our build. Just save the build definition by Ctrl S. Now we can create the build definitions that will execute our desired build deploy test workflow using all of the pieces that we have set up for the automated testing. Let's select a new build definition This time let's name it as build deploy test. For this build definition, navigate to the workspaces. In the workspaces tab, change the source control folder to be Fabricam Fiber Dev. Again, instead of the Fabricam Fiber folder. And navigate to the build defaults. Configure the build not to drop the output files to a shared folder, rather than the build doesn't copy the output files to a drop folder. So just make sure you select this option and navigate to process. In the process, click on show details, and then from the drop down, change the build definition file to lab default template.xaml. Select the lab process settings from the build process parameters and click the elapsed button. This will give me the option to select the environment that I have just configured. Click next. From the environment name, just select the Fabricam BTD, the one that we have configured. Click next. In the build, just choose the Fabricam Fiber Dev branch build, the build definitions that we have created, and leave the default as queue a new build. Then click next. In the deploy build, make sure that you check deploy the build. For deploying the build, it will asking us for the deployment script. We now need to specify what script to run in the test environment in order to deploy our build for testing. Let's select add. In the deployment script and argument, just type the following command. Please note that the idea behind the script is that this deployment script simply executes a script that does the actual work in deploying the Fabricam Fiber web application after it is built. The deploy.bat file is part of our Fabricam Fiber.web project, and it is configured to output to the build location. The location of the build located in the drop folder that we have just configured, which is vslm/ffdrops, is also passed as a parameter to deploy the script that we will know where to get the latest bits from. Just click tab in order to accept changes, and then select test from the left hand side and check the option of run this test in this environment. Ensure that the Fabricam Fiber BDT test setting is the one we have to choose for the test settings, and keep the default as selected and click finish. Save the new build definition by click Ctrl S. Now it is the time actually to test out the new build deploy test workflow. So from the Team Explorer, from the build view, right click on the build deploy test and click Queue New Build. The Queue New Build will open the dialog for the build information and the configuration. Just leave it as a default and click Queue. Once we have queued a build, double click on the build from my builds that we have just started. You will actually have the build status and the build information. So currently it is under running, building. Please note that It will take a few minutes for the build test process to finish, so please be patient. Once the build completes, view the summary to make sure that everything succeeded as expected. Now, let's make a change in the Fabric and Fiber web application so that we can show how our build, deploy, test workflow could help us catch regression errors in the user interface. In the Solution Explorer, load the create.cxml view in the Fabric and Fiber.web. You will find it located under Views, Customers, create.cshtml. Let's comment the input button so that we actually simulate a forgetful developer accidentally leaving in a change that breaks the user interface. Now, let's save our changes and let's make sure we check in these changes through the Team Explorer. Navigate to Source Control, my pending changes, and I will click Check in. Now, let's get back to our build Explorer and initiate a new build from the build deploy test workflow. I will right click and select Queue New Build. Now the build is running and let's wait until it's finished. Now the build reports that the test failed as expected and showing that there is a test that failed to be executed. If we actually navigate to the agent machine, you'll find that this was the old view before we deployed the new build to the server. If we navigate to it again, you'll find that the create button is no longer here, so that the build has been failed. By this, we have done with our lab. Thank you so much and meet you again.